Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. It just seems like we are just racing through this podcast because we're meeting some amazing people. Tane, how are you going today after our last podcast?
Yeah, good, thanks. The weather's changed. It's a bit weary, dreary at the moment now, but, can't always have good weather.
Yeah, the joys of winter, right? The joys of winter in New Zealand. You just have no idea. So, Tane, what have you put into your basket of knowledge since we last spoke?
I think what I've filled in my basket of knowledge this week, or since our last podcast, is understanding that, there's a lot that happens behind people's closed doors. And, it's easy to see what's out there when we're with people, and usually people put up a front, but understanding that, just because people are doing amazing things or have all these achievements, it doesn't mean that they're not struggling behind closed doors or haven't gone through struggles to get to where they are today.
Yeah, and that's so funny because that's pretty uncanny because that's my learning as well since we last spoke. And my learning is about the facade. Everyone has a facade, or not everyone. Everyone tries to have this mask on their faces, and they're trying to pretend that life is going all good, but inside there's a whole different story. And I think this is where communication and authentic communication is pretty important. Talking about how you actually feel without worrying about judgment is important. Whereas we don't do that. It's pretty hard for us to do that. And I've seen that happen a few times over the last few times since our last podcast. So yeah. What a great synergy, hey? What a great synergy. And I think that's a great synergy for our guest today. As always, we try and invite some amazing human beings onto this podcast. And I think we've done that again today. Welcome to our podcast, Ethan.
Kia ora, everyone. Ko Ethan aho. And yeah, thank you very much, Rajesh and Tane, for having me on today. No, I've been really excited to come on board, and I really like what you guys are doing, and giving that platform for people to share their story and share their journey and experiences through every certain aspects of their life.
Well, thank you, Ethan. I mean, it's a pleasure for us to have you on here. So before we get into that, tell us about yourself, Ethan. Tell our listeners out there, who is Ethan? What is he doing right now in his life? And then we'll get into your story.
So I always start with my origins. I was born and raised in Wellington. Grew up here pretty much first 16 years of my life before I moved up to do my final year of high school up in Fielding. And that was before coming down to Dunedin. Throughout my life, I've been really massive on my sports. And also huge passion in my life is around the sea. So I'm massive about spearfishing, freediving, and fishing. Basically anything on the water that involves gathering kaimoana is me to a T. So awesome. Yeah, and then also big values of my life are family. Always, they're my foundation, they're my backbone. So obviously being away for so long, especially being going up and down the country and whatnot, has been a bit of a challenge, but it's always one of those ones, we keep that contact, not very close contact. That's just a massive part of who I am. So main sports in my life was rugby. I played rugby basically all my life growing up. I've enjoyed the game ever since I was a little kid. I've only recently just stopped playing, just due to injuries and whatnot, but still have a good love for the game. So, and it's taught me a lot in my life, both directly and indirectly.
Awesome. I love the way you've spoken about yourself there, that family is important for you. Sport has been a big part of your life, but also kaimoana has been pretty important for you. Talking about kaimoana, how was it living in Fielding, where you're not close to any?
Well, yeah, that was, and this is an interesting one. I always try to explain to people, like, the sea is such a big part of my life. When I did move up there for that year, being away or not having that, at hand access to the water was pretty rough. Obviously at the same time, I was up there for rugby on a scholarship there, but it's those things where even though you might be up there for an opportunity, when you're not where your grounding, when your grounding aspects are, where your home is, essentially for me, it was pretty tough. things just weren't flowing the way they would naturally when I'm been able to get out for a dive on every most Saturdays and whatnot. So
Yeah.
that was a big challenge for me, man.
I can imagine, and I guess it's pretty hard because you have the opportunity for your sport, but it's actually when you move away from your sport that you realize your real passion comes to play. I'm guessing
Oh yeah.
that's when you realize, wait a minute.
Oh, big time, man.
Yeah.
Any opportunity I got to come home, sort of towards, so I was at the start and end of the school year, I took it because, with the rugby season, we were traveling all throughout the North Island most weekends, and if not, we're playing at home, so never really got an opportunity to go home throughout that mid-year. But it was great, obviously. I managed, if things, if the stars aligned and weather was good on a Saturday, Sunday, and when I was back, it was straight around to the coast.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to touch on is you mentioned that whānau and family are very important for you. So you were living in Fielding, like, oh man, I'm away from my whānau. Then you made the choice to move away, further away. What is your thinking around that there?
So, yes, obviously getting into high school. So I'd done fairly well through my high school rugby, whatever you want to call it, career journey, and managed to score myself a spot in the Otago Rugby Union Academy, and also have the privilege to be on a player development contract. So, yeah, in terms of opportunities, it was that case of just biting the bullet, but a sacrifice, I guess, and taking on, jumping into out of my comfort zone, and moving all the way down. And obviously, the uni was a slight interest to me, but at the time, my head was pretty 100% rugby. I was, I guess when you're pretty young and game, 18-year-old, and you're getting opportunities like that, you sort of everything else goes out the window, and you just straight into it. So,
I mean, also that's awesome that as an 18-year-old, you get this contract that sits in front of you. I mean, like you said, you're like, well, who cares about university as an 18-year-old?
Yeah.
A lot of young people in New Zealand, rugby is the main sport for a lot of young men here, or rugby league.
100%, man.
Yeah, and you get this in front of you. What are you gonna say? No, I've got to go to university. Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, that was pretty much bang on what was going through my head at the time. It was kind of like, I'd say I was about 95% hitting in the rugby game, and then about 5% in my uni game, which was reflected in that year. But I mean, it was quite an interesting year, that first year. Obviously, I sort of came down quite naive, in the sense that I was just completely focused and honed in on rugby. And rugby, when I did get there in the first year, took up a lot of time for me and energy. I guess you've got your 2 club trainings plus game suite club. And then the academy would be running you through 5 trainings on top of that. So it was quite a heavy workload for, someone who'd come fresh out of high school, made the trip down. At the time, I wasn't the most self-driven when I was, if I had to stick to a schedule or expectations that a coach had sort of laid out for me, that was easy to go by. But, it was jumping into a completely whole new pond, really. You go from high school where it's like, oh yeah, you think you've got it all down pat, you think you understand all the ins and outs that are required, but you jump into the big pond, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by top level players, some of the best in the world, and you're kind of like, jeepers, it's a long way to go, a long journey to go before you can start feeling comfortable.
And they were crazy for you because you're the top of your game when you're Fielding High School. You come down here where you, like you said before, you have all these amazing other players around you, but also at the same time you have this academic, I guess, expectation that you've got to try and achieve a certain level. And how did you manage that there? Because like you said, rugby was the main thing for you, and now you have to...
I mean, I kind of jumped in blindly and sort of thought, okay, I did the sciences at school. First year house sciences shouldn't be too bad. And I know Tony's probably looking at me and cracking, and even yourself probably laughing at that one, because even I do. I look back on it and I crack up at my thoughts that were going through my head in terms of enrolling into first year house science. And I jumped into it just sort of for the sake of saying I went to uni, and so that could go alongside the footy. Just so I could say, oh yeah, I'm doing it. But when really uni was on the back burner pretty much 7 days a week, it was, I'd we'd have trainings we'd have trainings about 5:30 in the morning, and then first lecture was at about 8. So you'd have to shower up, have breakfast after training at the academy gym. Rush to lectures. You'd be watching lectures for 4 or 5 hours, throughout the campus, and staying on library to try study. And then you're back at training again at night after. And I just ended up fizzling out in the end, and I kind of just flaked it, I guess. But I guess, yeah. And at the same time, I was just so immersed in the footy and driven to try and achieve. And I mean, when I got down there to Dunedin, I got an opportunity to play for the Tonga under-21 side.
Awesome.
And so, when you're building on like that, it's like, the dream's starting to, fall into place, one team after another. And I was hoping that this journey was going to just run smoothly, and so on. But that didn't quite happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's crazy, because when you're a young person, this is for anybody out there. When things start falling into place, you go, "Hey, this is it. I'm hitting my stride. I'm going well." But as we all know, life doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that at all. And do you want to tell us when life just changed a little bit for you? So you're the under-21 Tongan side, things are going all good, and then what happens?
Okay, so roughly this is, and I'll give you the exact date, but I just got back from playing for the Tonga under-21 side. We played at the Oceania tournament. We didn't do too well, but at the same time, it was a massive privilege and just huge honour to represent my country of ethnic background, especially on behalf of my nan. My nan was a massive driver when she was around, for me, and just everything that I sort of did from both the schooling to footy. So I got back from the team and was playing a few games, played a few games for my under-21 side at the club, and then got my shot at playing Prems. And I played a game of Prems. It was on Saturday, the 22nd of June, 2018. Went well, everything was great. Academy managers were happy. It was looking good. And then the Tuesday after, I went to a training. And after training, went home, went to have just a midday nap. By then, it was mid-year break. And I went to sleep, and all of a sudden, my left foot just started swelling up, and just massive amount of searing pain. And I was sitting there thinking, and at the time, I was living in my own flat by myself, no one else. It was like a sort of granny flat where there were three rooms, apartments in it, and then I was at the back. And basically, my foot swelled up to the size of about a rugby ball, doubled in size almost. And the pain was like, I always explain it to people, like someone had got a knife and was just jamming it in my foot, and I didn't know what was happening. I thought my ankle was locking up and all sorts. And so, I called my mate. He took me to the emergency doctors down on Moray Place, or just around from Moray Place. Had to wait in there. Was just absolute agony. I couldn't. The pain was just unbearable. It was the worst pain I'd ever experienced, and I had no clue what was going on. Waited for about an hour and a half. The time I saw the doctor, he looked a bit confused. He thought I could have broken it, thought it could have been gout. So anyways, I went through this big process of just going in and out to different doctors, and each one didn't know what was going on. So I think over that course of the week, from the Tuesday to the Sunday, when I'd flown home on the Friday, I'd seen about 8 doctors for them to finally identify that I'd had cellulitis. And it was very weird because I had 3 blood tests done that week, and they said all the indicators for infection were just normal. Like there was no spike until the very last day when, they were like, they'd run 2 in the same morning, and the surgeon came back and said, you've got a gnarly case of cellulitis, and it started to spread out my leg. And so they admitted me. They kept me in hospital for a week. I guess it's a classic. I feel like this is a classic with surgeons, as they come in and, if you came in a day later, we would have had to think about amputation. And I'm like, okay, you have to say, you're saying that because I'm 18. So, so I thought, it was pretty gnarly. And so after that, I did my treatment at hospital. They sent me on my way home, and I went about my business. Couldn't walk for another, 4 weeks after that. So a total of 6 weeks off feet. And then once I started, the swelling went back down and the infection had gone. try to keep walking around, but nothing. It just, my foot never fully, completely reduced in swelling and pain. Always was just in pain.
Yeah.
And so I carried on like that till December. Went and got another. I went and saw a surgeon back in Wellington. He got an MRI, scans the joint, and he goes, scans foot, and he says, "Oh, you've got like a really bad case of arthritis. Like your joint is just liquid." I was like, "What does that mean?" He was like, "So the cartilage in between the T5 tarsometatarsal joint, which is just like a shock absorber, almost just stops the bones from rubbing. It's all just liquid now. It just shatters, and you've been walking around with the bone just grinding and grinding and grinding." So the arthritis had developed, and I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he goes, "Well, there's only one procedure, and it's a joint fusion." I said, "Okay, does that mean I'm going to play rugby again?" And he goes, "Well, I do this for patients who are like 65 plus, not 20, not 18-year-old rugby players." And I said, "Oh, well, I play in the scrum. Will the medal be able to handle the scrum?" He's like, "I don't know." So it was, I'm sitting there in this room, like, "So you're telling me that you don't know if I'm going to play rugby again?" And he's like, "Pretty much." And I was like, okay. And I remember sitting in the car, and before I turned the ignition, it was just, like so much confusion. And in terms of like emotional confusion, I was just blank. I just remember staring at the steering wheel of my little Honda Civic, which is my first car, and I was just sitting there, just like, wow. I never thought this would be me. I'd seen other people, like I'd seen other players around me, older, younger, same age, that had been like, shoulder replacements, and they've either made a comeback or they've just said, nah, that's that. And I was just like, oh, far out. I'm the example, the idea that if you have, need your plan B, and I never thought of plan B properly. And so that summer I was working and doing a bit of labouring. And I went pretty downhill, because I'd done a lot of work, even just with what I could do. For the first time in my life, I'd picked up the ability to sort of take it on my own account to train. And I had a shit first semester, so I tried really hard to pick up the second sem. Was doing all these things, and I thought, right, if I get these in line, things will just be all right. And that just cut that right off. Stopped that feeling of progression. And this is probably the first summer I'd experienced some form of episode, like Men's One Wellness episode. I was at work, standing there one morning having my coffee, and just had a full-out panic attack for no apparent reason. There was no sort of trigger for it.
Yeah.
I just remember standing there, whole face just clenched up. For about 20 seconds, I felt like I was basically paralyzed, watching my boss and my other colleagues I was working with walking around. For about 20 seconds, I just could not move. And I was just this massive feeling of just anxiousness and just fear of something. And I didn't quite know what. I had to run to the car, just sat in there, just had to take, about 5-10 minutes just for myself. And it was just, it was pretty gnarly. Because for me, it was that uncertainty, all that message, from the few words the surgeon said. It wasn't like a muscle injury where you can just kind of rehab your way through it. He was like, right, I'm putting metal in your foot. Don't know if you're going to play. And so it's starting, going into the second year at uni, there was a lot of question marks, so many question marks in my head. And I mean, this wasn't my first time experience like Men's One Wellness. My journey goes right back to when I was 14. But in terms of the more recent times, that one was the big shakeup. It basically, that losing that, for me, I lost a sense of who I was.
Totally.
I'd grown up, footy was something that I really wore on my sleeve. It was something that I just loved playing since I was a kid. And when it came to family and whatnot, a lot of that family time was revolving around my games on Saturday. We look forward to that, the trainings, the prize givings, the team trips and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So having that ripped away was initially a very difficult thing. Lost so much confidence in myself, and it was hard. I only really had my dad to talk to at the time. So that was for me, you're going into seeing like settings with your mates from footy, and it was tough because they're all tracking along, just yarning as you would as a footy team, and you just feel like you're slowly sort of drifting away because you can't be on that same level.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because thank you for sharing that, because I think that's really powerful, and I think what you can see from there is your sense of identity was lost, because even though you were Ethan, you were not just Ethan, you were Ethan the footy player, and all of a sudden, basically in an instant, that footy player but disappeared, and now you go, actually, who the hell is Ethan? Like, who is Ethan? Because now your big identity is gone. But going back, so this was your second year of university, was it, or was it your first year of university when it happened?
So the second year of uni, for me, there were a few things that I'd tried to.
Can I ask you a question? Did this happen in your first year or your second year? This.
The injury.
Yeah, the injury. Yeah.
Injury was in the first year. So
Okay,
the illness and arthritis was in the first
Awesome.
year, and
yeah.
So
can I ask you? So sorry, sorry. So you have this happen to you.
Yeah.
What makes you want to come back? Like, you have this crisis here, and you go, "Oh, my Honda Civic, like, damn, what's going on here?" The easiest decision for some people is to go, actually, I'm cutting my ties. This is it. I'm just going to stay at home. What made you want to go back?
So, in tandem with the surgeon, I spoke to him about it, and I said, "Look, you really think I need this 100%?" And he was like, "Oh," and this is also with appointments with my GP as well.
Yep.
And my GP wasn't really the greatest with it. His more advice was, try not to think about it, and it will just disappear. And I was like, "Oh, really? Like, I've got arthritis in my foot, and you're telling me to just not think about it?"
Yeah.
But my surgeon said, "Look, try, just see how you go in the pre-season." So yeah, and then if it's worse, you can call us back up, and we'll book the surgery date. So it gave me that little glimmer, like, if I just do this, take that. So of course, coming back down was like, okay, I'm going to show that these injuries never can confine me to recovery and rehab protocols. My whole high school career, since I started playing, first 15 and second year, first 15 and year 12, I was dealing with injuries all through and through. And so my mind was, if there was a slight chance that I could just grind through it, I'll take it and run with it, and basically sacrifice my own physical well-being for the sake of, showing people I can play rugby. So I went back down in that second year thinking, right, I'm going to give that pre-season a crack and just see how it goes. And so I went in, taped up, tried to get out there, took 3 steps of the first jog, and I just looked at my coach and said, "No, I'm not playing this season."
Yeah.
And so I went to my academy managers, and with the academy, basically it's a 3-year thing where you are a part of the academy for 3 years before they let you go, and plus the contract still had 1 more year on it, which was that second year. So other players who I'd seen who had big injuries and leg breaks, they just work through with what they can. And I sort of took it on myself. I was like, right, I'm going to do what I can just throughout this year. I know playing's off the cards, but at the same time, there were a lot of things I still could do in the academy. Just it was a bit hard not being able to do the rugby side of it.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, after that pre-season, I tried to do it. I said to club coaches, academy managers, "Nah, I can't do it." And then obviously called the surgeon. I said, "Look, can we get a date booked for the surgery?" And so once I'd come to grips with that, I'd re-signed up to have a crack at doing the first year for B-side physiology.
Yeah.
So that was just basically repeating a lot of the papers I'd failed in first year. And that was a daunting process initially, because it presented a challenge that previously I'd failed. And I guess for me, that was quite a scary thing, because I was so used to just kind of chipping away and succeeding, one after the other. But, I really looked at myself and I said, look, you're going to have a crack at this, and you're going to show yourself that you can actually do this. Because again, with the loss in confidence, us being told rugby gone, and then reflecting on my first year at uni, which was absolutely atrocious, yeah, confidence levels were not big. They were very, very low. And so I just knuckled down on that year again and just attacked it, really, like try to have a crack at it, take that drive I had with rugby and put it into that, as well as try to find other interests. So that year I got real big into taking care of my health and nutrition, which was growing up, which were two things for me that I was very poor with.
Yep.
So it was awesome to be able to have your little interest and hobby on one side and like your career focus, or, basically your career focus, but taking that drive that you'd built from rugby and just basically redirecting it into that.
Which is awesome, because a lot of people don't do that. They lose their identity and they go, okay, cool, it's all over. And it's pretty awesome that you've said, all right, cool, I've got this drive here. Let me just shift the drive into different space. But let me go back a little bit. So that's awesome. But you also mentioned in the summer break you had your first, your most recent mental episode, I guess, mental health episode. Were you wary of that when you came to Dunedin as well, when you came back down? Was it something, oh, actually, wait a minute, or did you just go, right, cool, it happened, it was a moment, and I carry on?
No, look, I came home and, I spoke with my old man just about it. I basically just said, like, I don't know, I just explained how I was feeling at the time. I was just like, I just don't feel like me. I feel like I'm just lost. And he was just saying, yeah, well, you've dealt with a pretty major blow to yourself physically, but also, being in that space of uncertainty, I just kind of thought, well, yeah, what am I? And I explained what happened at work. And we just had a good chat actually just out on the deck. We're just sitting there looking out at the sea and yarning about that. So I always take it. I kept that in mind. It was not something that I just walked past. It was a case of acknowledging that it had happened. Just so that down the track, if I was to do things that were going to help me cope a bit better or give me something to fall back on, if those come up, that was the idea behind having a chat with the old man, just to see, and then also doing things for myself so that I could, I wouldn't say, yes, kind of put safeguards up really for my own self.
Because it is pretty scary, right? This happens, and I think it goes back to what Tanya and I said at the start, is the communication. It would have been so easy for you being a rugby player, this is your life, and this happens to you, and just to have to hide the facade. Because as you mentioned before, hey, in a rugby community, people are just moving ahead. It takes a big thing, and we'll talk about it in a second, to go, actually, things aren't okay. There's actually something else going on here. So you spoke about finding your other interests when you were in your second year, which was, your health and nutrition. Anything else that popped up for you that actually, wait a minute, this is I'm going to flow with this now?
My actual course became a massive interest for me, especially the physiology side of it. Hence why I got into physiology now.
Yeah.
Because for me, I remember we were doing immunology as one of the topics, and they're explaining the whole immune system response to infection and this and the lymph system and everything. And I'm like, okay, so you're explaining all these defense mechanisms that my body's supposed to be doing. Yet I get a little scratch on my foot and something gets inside, and then they're talking about cutting my leg off. And then I just got real captivated by that. I was like questioning the lecturer. I was like, why did this happen to me? Why didn't my cytokines and everything pour out in the bloodstream and target and kill that? It was just a normal little staph infection that got in, tiny, because even the surgeon couldn't find the actual
oh wow.
Yeah, there was no wound or anything on the foot. I just said, some guy stepped on it on Saturday's game, and they thought, we'll run off that and call it broken. But he said there was a tiny wee bit of dry skin, which he put it down to, that must have split. And then, anyways, I sat behind after a tutorial one day, just talking with this lecturer for ages about it. And it really did sort of it made me so interested, because it was, I guess, anger. I was angry at physiology, why is this not, why did this not work with me? It became a full-time thing. I was really enjoying just being in that scheduled routine and still having to commit to the footy footy side of things with the academy. So I was still expected to show up to gym sessions and play development sessions and all those kinds of things. So I was quite busy. I still had a lot to do. It wasn't like I was just sitting, allowing things to just pile up.
Yeah.
So like I went from being someone who was not very self-driven. Like I said earlier, I used to just, if they laid out a formula or just a spreadsheet for me and said, right, you just got to do that, I could do that, easily. But if you took that away from me, I'd just kind of, old me would just be like, okay, well, time to sit down, slap on a movie, jam some PS4, and it'll be me.
Yeah.
So it was cool to really work on those little self-building things, get myself into a disciplined system and routine. But that was another goal for me, to just build. I wouldn't say like a new me. I'd just say just reshaping. So that took a lot of my time and effort as well. And but it was all willful.
Awesome.
I really wanted to do these things, become a structured, tidy, scheduled person. And it did take time.
Yeah,
it took time building into it, but no, it was a cool year, second year.
Awesome. And so awesome, because what I want to ask you is, was that an internal driver, or was there someone externally out there that guided you? So, hey, actually, Ethan, maybe it was all internal.
Internal, man. I remember. So when I came out of it all came from when I got told after I've got the foot injury, my coaches for the Otago under-19 team said, "That's you, mate. You're done. Like, for the year, we're not going to put you in the team, because we know we don't want you to get any worse, like in terms of damaging your foot." And I sat there in my flat and I had a massive conversation with myself. So last time I suffered a big injury, so I'd done my AC joint for the first time, but I'd repeatedly done it. I never got to rest it. And I just grinded out the last back end of the season. I was constantly smashing it up. Got to the end of that season. This is in high school. And, I played through the last of my first 15 games, all the rep season. And basically my arm was just no good. I could hardly lift my arm, my hand above my hip for ages. And, I just pointed finger and blamed the world. And I was like, you know what, bugger this. And I ended up just going off on the summer, I'd call it an eatathon. I was just eating and eating and eating. And so, lastly, I really reflected back on that and how I felt. I thought I had two options here. You're either going to go back and do what you did last time, or you were going to try and do something that you've never been able to do before. Stick to something and adhere to it. Be consistent and do the things that essentially make you uncomfortable. Yeah. I hated training. I hated it. I only did it because I knew it would make my rugby better. But doing this for myself was so much better than doing it because a coach told me to do it.
Awesome.
Having a reason, your own purpose to do it. Not just like, okay, it's for the sport. I'm only going to do this and be miserable for the sport. But now I was able to translate that and be like, I can do this for myself. I can do this for my sport. I built that in me now. I fell in love with that process rather than that sort of, end goal, that fickle, well, not fickle, just very unstable sort of goal.
And I guess because the key thing is, a lot of in our lives these days, this happens, right? You only do stuff because of a certain outcome. I'm going to study because I want the grades. I only want to exercise because I want to get fit, because I want to do this here. As opposed to, when I speak to some clients that I work with, it's like, why do you lose your weight? Oh, because I want to be healthy. But for what purpose? Oh, because I want to look great. Oh, yeah, but is that actually really why you want to do it? So it's awesome that and it's really hard. I mean, as you speak about it today, it sounds like a simple process, but we both know that it's tough. It's so much easier to sit down. Yeah, you can sit down and watch TV. Who cares? Nobody cares.
Well, everyone sort of thinks it's the start-end thing. I used to think that. I used to think, okay, 12 weeks to this, 8 weeks to that. When you realize, if people looked at it the same way you looked at life, you don't just start a job and think, I'm going to start year 1, year 2, that's me done. I'm, finish the rest of my life. It's a constant journey.
Totally.
You can't not maintain. It's just like I say, it should just be like brushing your teeth. you might miss it once, might miss it twice, but you always keep pulling back onto it.
Sure,
You know
exactly.
you need to do that over and over again.
Yeah,
But it's not the case of you get white teeth and then leave it.
yeah,
You got to maintain it. So
exactly. Yeah, and I those 12-week things or whatever. If you look at it properly, it's okay, cool. It's for me to build the habits, and then I carry on the habit without having this plan around me, which is hard to do.
that's, I guess for me it was trying to learn the underlying values behind driving, being self-driven.
Yeah,
If you can stick to something, adhering to something, building that habit, building those habits, for me those were very foreign ideas. I didn't have that. My mates around me did. I used to really just resent it. Hey, I know. It's like, nah, mate, you wouldn't catch me near a dumbbell. You wouldn't catch me running the roads.
yeah,
But then I just really fell in love with, taking care of my own health and seeing how I could perform. And it really did help me, I guess, cope with not having rugby there.
yeah,
Mentally, I was feeling great. Physically, that just came with it.
yeah.
But at the same time, I just used to love getting in it, love getting in it. Even on the worst days, I love getting in there. And so that
Brilliant.
second year, it was great that I had that. But I did also deal with being somewhat of an outsider.
Yeah,
Like I really did feel outcasted in some sense. So I flirted with a whole bunch of fellas who, they're my best mates. I love the boys and I miss them dearly. But it was, for me personally, this was nothing on them. It was just like we'd all been together playing rugby. We'd all been on that same path. And now all of a sudden I wasn't on that same focus track. Like, yes, I was still in the academy, but I was more so trying to redefine things and just I'd reshaped how my approach was to the year. And as much as we still had academy stuff days together, I wasn't playing rugby on Saturdays. I was only with them in the gym, and then they'd go out on the field, get to pass the ball and run around, and I just had to stand there and watch. And it was hard, because it was like you couldn't have those same chats with them. You couldn't really build that same kind of, share that same platform to yarn. They come home from Tuesday, Thursday trainings. I'd be at the flat by myself that whole hour and a half that they're at training. Or then, they go have clubbies after. Or, I'd have to, at the time, I decided to coach one of the junior teams at the club. And so I'd have that. That was great. But it's still not, for me being 19, I just wanted to play. I was just like, I'll tell you what, man, like I was coaching the under-20s team and I was still eligible to play for the team. And this was about leading up to the surgery. I was just like, should I do it? I was like to the boys, should I just chuck on the boots? Like I seriously was so just itching to get back on. But it made it difficult for me because there were clash of heads here and there, or just more like clash of interests. The boys were doing the rugby thing. I was hard out into my gymming and whatnot. And I was very passionate about, getting into the gym and sort of building that. And so the boys used to take a few little digs at me and whatnot, which was always quite funny. But at the same time, it was funny at first, but it did also make me feel a bit like, bit of a, am I being a bozer, rah. So that was a bit difficult for me, just not having that same sort of mutual connection with them anymore.
Yeah. And I guess this happens, when you're in a tribe, your tribe is linked by a common interest. And now, so you still have the common interest, but the tribe has moved on to their interests are a little bit different because they're focusing on, let's say, the hunt, and you can't do the hunt anymore because you've just got to do you've got to stay back and do the skinning of the meat.
The skinning,
You're like, oh, damn.
Just trying to describe it. It's not putting it on them being like, they're cutting me off. It's just we weren't on the same track anymore. Essentially, we weren't on the exact same track, and so it was a hard one. But I tried. We still got along. We still had good times together, and it was a great year. But those were some of the that was one of the main challenges, not being there in the same lane as them anymore. I was just kind of outside. I was just kind of on the inside of it, on that left lane, and they're sort of just cruising down the right a little bit faster,
And I think that's also a reminder that life happens, life happens to people around us, so we live our life and we also forget that others are living their lives as well at the same time, and they're trying to achieve their goals or whatever. And then, it's very easy for us to go, oh, it's their fault, not my fault, but hey, life happens to all of us,
Yeah, the point finger thing, was a massive. I used, growing up, I used to, and it's. I feel like it is a very innate thing for us, to when things hit the fan, it's like, oh, I don't really want it to bring back on me, so it's going to be easier to blame. For me, blame my foot, blame my circumstance, blame that I flattered by myself, blame this, blame that, rah.
Yeah.
But sometimes now I've learned better now to be like, well, just take it on. If you take it on the chin, you gain a lot more out of that. Yes, it hurts. Anything accepting owning up to anything's going to hurt. Because we are beings that it's uncomfortable for us. We don't like having that kind of stressor on us. However, if you get comfortable at taking things on the chin, you will be a lot more open to growth. You'll be open to learning new things. As much as it's a hard pill to swallow, what you gain out of it is massive. And I think as well, just as a character, in terms of your character, people, it's a lot easier to sort of break down barriers and share with people when you have that censorship of, I'm someone who can take that on, and wear that, and be able to talk and open myself up to what you have to say. So that was. Yeah, it was a big learning for me, taking things on the chin, and it was like, so with the foot, I could have blamed everything on that, and I could have just, I could have moved home, could have dropped it all, and just said, I had arthritis, mate. I got a surgery that only 65-year-olds get. She's never gonna do it.
Yeah.
But it just, for me, sparked something to just be like, well, wanted to prove that I'm a bit more than just a rugby player. I can do other things with myself.
Yeah, it's important to say that because a lot of us in our world live by these titles that people give to us. I'm XYZ, and if I'm not XYZ, then oh damn, what am I? And it's very hard to shift to ABC, right? If you're XYZ, XYZ, they take that away, then you go, oh, gotta be ABC. Nah, too hard.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, that doesn't work for me. It's not clicking for me.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.